When council members attending the meeting electronically or disconnect or reconnect, can you please alert me so that this can be recorded in the minutes of the meeting? Council members are to identify themselves when they advise the chair that they wish to speak. If you're on screen, please just raise your hand. If you are by audio only, please just say chair, and I will add your name to the list. With respect to a vote, council members are only required to state a nay vote. No statement is required if the member is in favor. Council members and staff should put their telephone or their computer on mute unless they wish to speak. Council members are expected to be involved in and participate in the meeting and the conversation. Council members shall text the corporate officer if they are having technical difficulty with their telephone or computer. And the meeting shall be recessed for up to 10 minutes if a technical difficulty occurs on our side, which results in council members not being able to be connected to the meeting. So with that, I will ask council to adopt the agenda with the addition of one item, which is a mayor's update as item 4.5. Moved by Councillor Pettengill, seconded by Councillor Anderson. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. With that, we move on to item 3A1. This is first reading of District of Zoning Bylaw number 2200, 2011, Amendment Bylaw number 2706, 2019. And I will turn it over to Ms. McJanet to do the staff presentation. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Elliott. I just want to double check with council that you are able to see my presentation and first slide and not my speaking notes. Okay. So my name is Sarah McJanet, and today I'm introducing rezoning application that we received in September 2019 for the residential property located at 39319 Falcon Crescent. This rezoning would amend the Comprehensive Development Zone, CD38, to allow for conversion of the residence to a full childcare facility with up to 24 children. And so Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2706 is presented today for first reading along with the public comments that we have received to date. Just in terms of overview, the applicant is the owner-operator of Project Play, which its home-based childcare in 2017. This childcare facility provides 8 spaces for kids aged 3 to 5 years. Project Play has applied to spot zone and convert the dwelling to a full childcare facility, non-residential, and cease the joint residential use, thereby shifting the occupancy to an A2 assembly occupancy. The applicant's rationale for this rezoning is detailed in the report, and it includes their long-standing intention to expand the childcare to 16, which is allowed under the current zoning. However, given financial investments required to gain code compliance for greater than 8 children, Project Play has applied to expand to a full group care facility in line with their provincial group care license. They've established the childcare and served the neighborhood and have invested significantly in the facility to date. And no other space currently is available that meets their needs. They hold a desire to stay within a residential setting in the neighborhood and to offer a greater level of service to the community. So the proposed expansion would encompass both the base main story as well as the upper story of the building, and in total allow for 2 full classroom spaces, so 16 children on the first story and 8 children upstairs for a total of 24 children. So this represents an additional 8 children over the current maximum permitted capacity for a residential childcare facility within our current zoning bylaw, and 16 more spaces than currently offered at Project Play. All the required indoor and outdoor space is provided in the existing dwelling, and there's no proposed increase in the allowable gross floor area or site coverage. For context, this is a quick snapshot to show Lot 4, situated in the Ravenswood neighborhood, east of Brennan Park. It's a 102-lot subdivision, which is the last phase of the Loggers Lane small lot residential redevelopment that was approved in 2008. And it's currently more than 75% built out. Lot 4 is just under 7,000 square feet or 642 square meters. It's an interior lot on the outside of the Falcon Crescent bend. On the lot is a newly built 2-story detached residential dwelling with a 2-car garage, and the rear of the lot is adjacent to Loggers Creek. The entire rear is fenced to contain the substantial outdoor play area for the childcare. Ravenswood is in close proximity to downtown via Loggers Lane. It's less than a 200-meter walk from via the corridor trail to Brennan Park Recreation Center. And this shows the local road network and subdivision access via 2 entries, so from Loggers Lane via Blue Jay Way, as well as entry from the south via Raven Drive to Cardinal Drive. And the internal limited local roads in Ravenswood consist of these loop roads that are 18-meter right-of-ways and inclusive of 2 vehicle travel lanes, sidewalks on each side, and rollover curbs. The proposed inclusion of a full childcare facility is aligned with and accommodated within our residential neighborhood designation in the OCP, which encompasses a wide range of housing types, neighborhood commercial, institutional uses such as schools, places of worship, utilities, neighborhood parks, and open spaces. That said, the proposal does introduce a new expanded use within the CD38 zone, which was established in 2008 with the intention of creating a detached small lot housing zone that approximated the scale of the historic Dentville neighborhood. The small lot detached residential lots do provide more affordable detached housing form, but this zone does not have the same integrated mix and diversity of housing forms that are now being sought for neighborhoods through our more recent planning directions and policies in our community plan. With this spot zoning, Amendment Bylaw 2706 adds the additional principal use of childcare facility for Lot 4 only. The district zoning bylaw does not currently prescribe a maximum number of spaces that can be accommodated within a childcare facility, a non-residential facility. That's been left to provincial regulation. However, in the case of this spot zone, the use is subject to a maximum occupancy of 24 among a number of other conditions that I'll just note shortly. For the parking standards, we've considered the precedent parking standard used in other zones of 1 space for 6 kids and 1 space per employee. And with a maximum of 24 children, a total of 7 spaces would be required for Project Play. As Council is likely aware, this standard has proven difficult to achieve on either standard or small lot residential properties. And in mixed-use settings, there's an example where it's been relaxed and combined with parking for other uses, so shared parking. For Lot 4 on-site, there is a 2-car garage and a 2-car apron, which allows for designated 2 cars for drop-off and pickup, in addition to employee parking potential within the garage. The 5 remaining spaces are proposed off-site on the underutilized roadway along Blue Jay Way. In terms of additional prescribed uses for the child care, there's a list in the report. They are highlighted here. They include full containment of the use within the building, with the exception of the outdoor play area, providing the required play areas as required by provincial licensing requirement. Of course, the occupancy maximum of 24 children, provision of 2 off-street parking spaces for drop-off and pickup, as well as provision of secure bike parking and stroller storage within the garage or fenced rear area, screened from view, a maximum of 1 child care business sign, as well as provision for increased fence height from 6 feet to 8 feet along the internal side yards for additional screening as needed, although that has not been proposed for there is existing fencing, but it meets the bylaw as it currently sits with 6 feet. To the second condition of use, this highlights the required indoor and outdoor area requirements that the province has set out for each licensed capacity, and you can see that shown in multiples of 8. It amounts to 3.7 square meters of indoor space and 6 meters of outdoor space per child. And Vancouver Coastal Health, the licensing office, has previewed Project Play's expansion plans and has confirmed the additional area required. For a proposed capacity of 24 children, the total available indoor and outdoor areas are sufficient to meet the net area recommendations for provincial childcare regulations. The applicant, the application was posted to the district's development showcase in January. The applicant held a public information meeting, and which was attended by over 43 neighbors with questions and comments. All public feedback that has been received up until June 24th was included in the report attachment 3, and there was an additional letter that was circulated yesterday as well. And so as council can see, there is a spectrum of input that we've received that represents individual perspectives as well as community interests as a whole. There were more than 16 individuals that commented and cited concerns about the proposed child care expansion. And then there were an additional 18 individuals that provided support for the application and noted the need for increased child care access within the community. The areas of highest concern raised by neighbors have focused on traffic, safety, and parking. They note concern with limited on-site parking, congested street parking, and blocked driveways and vehicle turning. And staff note this is an interior lot that is situated in the Falcon Crescent bend, which naturally reduces roadway visibility and compresses the distance between the driveways. And in addition to concerns respecting traffic generation, parking, and noise, we've received comment on loss of privacy, declining property values and compensation, as well as a concern for changes in neighborhood character. Increased childcare capacity, so bumping the current number of spaces up by 16, will generate additional traffic with daily pickup and drop-off. Project Play's proposed hours of operation are Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. However, the majority of students are there basically between 8 and 5, 4:30 or 5 p.m. There are distinct morning and afternoon peak periods between 8 and 9:30, and then in the afternoon, 4:30 to 5:30. So traffic generation is and will continue to be split between active, walking or biking, and vehicular modes. And so to give council a sense of the breakdown currently, as of May 2020, after reopening post-COVID closures, 5 of the 8 children currently registered live within the immediate neighborhood. So that means that more than 50% of children are within walking distance of the facility and may arrive by foot or bike. The remaining 50% arrive by vehicle from outside the neighborhood currently. So if we look to the increase in 24 licensed spaces and apply a conservative mode split of 25 to 50%, would mean that 12 to 18 children are anticipated to arrive by vehicle. And this is in the absence of any other measures that we could include to reduce demand and shift travel modes. To address the traffic concerns and reduce congestion and parking aggravations, Project Play proposes both demand-side measures as well as traffic management and parking protocol. So some of the things that are included are staggered drop-off and pickup times for families, giving priority placement to families within 500 meters of the daycare, as well as providing on-site bike and stroller parking, as well as posting and requiring families to abide by a traffic management and parking plan and code of conduct. And so that's been detailed in the report. To further secure the operator's commitment to ongoing traffic and parking management, what is proposed is a a Section 219 covenant in favor of the municipality that would be registered on title, requiring the licensed facility to have and maintain a traffic management plan and off-site parking plan. And so this would also entail written agreement with families not to block driveways and park only in designated areas that are identified in the plan, as well as maintenance of the bike and stroller parking, as well as other measures to support active transportation modes. Registration of this covenant would be a requirement prior to adoption of the zoning amendment bylaw. And because the covenant runs with the land, it also secures the obligation of any future childcare owner operator on Lot 4 to maintain a traffic management operational plan. And there you have the traffic management and parking pieces. And also I'll just highlight the Blue Jay Way context. So we did a lot of review, which includes sort of the immediate context and traffic circulation and use of parking. So this image highlights the local road context and typical available capacity on the entry road, Blue Jay Way. So with the 5 additional spaces for drop-off and pickup that are proposed off-site, this is where they would be located. We have discussed and reviewed with planning, engineering, operations, and Squamish Fire Rescue, and the proposal is considered reasonable in order to accommodate the proposed use. We'd just like to note for council that the proposal is not to sign or designate parking exclusively for the daycare along Blue Jay Way, but to allow simply shared use of the roadway for weekday peak periods for parking or for drop-off and pickup. And this is in very close proximity to the daycare, but avoids congestion in front of the residential or in front of the unit. And so the applicant has also, as part of the rezoning, committed to funding and installing a number of parking signs in the Falcon Crescent bend on the interior. There's currently already a no parking sign in front of the daycare, but some additional signs would be helpful, and these are estimated to in the range of $500 for each sign. Based on our current child care action plan, as council is very aware, there's a local need that is anticipated to be in the order of 72 new spaces each year for the next 10 years. This would help us achieve our target child care access rate of 30%, or 30 spaces per 100 kids aged 0 to 12. And so where and how we integrate these spaces is quite important consideration going forward. So like housing diversity of childcare options is important with a mix of residential and non-residential settings. In the report, staff have detailed and provided some review in terms of the number of infant toddler spaces and where those are offered. Currently, residential childcare's 42% of infant toddler spaces are in family homes, but in the 3 to 5 year age group, 35% are in family homes, and the remaining 65% are group care facilities that are situated in a mix of purpose-built facilities in use of converted buildings or co-located with schools or churches, places of worship. Ideally, Squamish families are able to access diversity of childcare options in proximity to home, work, school, and other places or services they regularly travel to. And so this can be considered similar to other community uses such as early learning centers or similar to schools with neighborhood-based catchment areas. And so there's a need for integration based on the Child Care Action Plan and the recommendations in the Child Care Needs Assessment and Strategy to look to areas where we have high child populations, which is throughout the community, as well as around existing schools and future planned family service hubs and near parks and the Brennan Park Recreation Center. Just have a couple more slides for council, and then I'll get right to the recommendation. The Project Play rezoning proposal it does advance our community plan policy directive to increase licensed childcare spaces. It also integrates childcare amenity within an existing single-use neighborhood development. And while the childcare use is pre-existing as a home-based business within the Ravenswood neighborhood, it does introduce an expanded scale and intensity of use in what is currently a single-use only neighborhood. And it's recognized as, rather than being proposed as part of the new development from the start, and nor is it part of an already established neighborhood node. So we recognize that the childcare use will drive increased neighborhood activity and traffic, as well as noise, and identified neighborhood concerns have been acknowledged through this. There are a number of active measures proposed to reduce the impact of parking and traffic, and so those are put forward for both community and council consideration. Staff, in reviewing this application, has applied a child and family lens to the review based on our commitment around the Squamish Children's Charter, and we are recommending Bylaw 2706 for first reading. So here's the first reading recommendation that's in the report. We're very much interested in the input of council on this amending bylaw for this spot zoning. There is also an alternate recommendation in the report. There are two. One is to refer the application back to staff for further review should council deem that be the best course of action. Or another alternate consideration is to give first two readings of the bylaw at council's full discretion. So I will leave it there. I do have the alternate recommendations up on a separate slide if council would like me to put those up. But I thank you and welcome questions and council direction.
Thank you, Ms. McJanet. Council, any questions? Councillor Stoner.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. Just looking back at kind of the history of the zoning of this property, and if we're setting precedent here. So this was zoned as a single-family neighborhood back in 2008. I want to just clarify that date. And then also that the bylaw being brought forward would basically guarantee that this could only be used as a child care facility even if we had to change in ownership over time.
Through the mayor, that is correct. The original rezoning did occur in 2008, and it was specifically for a detached single unit subdivision as part of that larger Loggers Lane approval. And secondly, the Lot 4 spot zone and the way it's set up in Bylaw 2706 would allow child care facility on Lot 4 only. So it would apply to that legal lot, and the covenant would secure, as proposed, would secure the conditions, and that would run with the land for any future operator for the child care facility.
Thank you for that clarification. I have another question. In terms of, can you go to the slide that has the suggested parking area on, I'm blanking, is it Blue Jay? Yeah, that one. So I appreciate the amount of effort and energy that's gone into trying to figure out the best way to do this in terms of parking and reducing traffic. My one concern with this proposal is the probability of people turning left or right off a Loggers Lane into Blue Jay and then doing a U-turn on Falcon Crescent to then park on Blue Jay and then drop their kids off. I'm just wondering how we try and avoid people doing that, or if that's a concern from staff's perspective.
Thank you for the question. This has been discussed in terms of the overall circulation for the neighborhood, and to avoid U-turns that would occur from someone entering into the subdivision via Blue Jay Way and then having to turn around. Because of the loop system of the internal road network, what has been suggested and would be laid out in the traffic management plan would be for those people that are coming from the south to enter the neighborhood from the south, come through the subdivision on Falcon Crescent and turn left into Blue Jay Way facing as they're leaving, so to avoid any kind of tricky turnaround. So to use the local roads, and so depending on where people are coming from the outside, there'd be a preference, I think, to come in from the south to allow for or to prevent that crazy turning activity. Of course, because these are highly connected loop roads, it does allow for that circulation, but it is that is one of the options. Another option that was detailed in the report that I didn't mention in the presentation is also the consideration for applying the concept of Drive to 5 also, which is to utilize some of the public parking that is available, particularly at these weekday peak periods at Brennan Park, which is about 160 meters along the corridor trail. So that is another option, should there be other vehicles parked there, or to help alleviate some of the congestion of using the local loop roads.
Okay, and then I have one further question, which is around the provincial requirements for space and licensing. By the slide that you had in the staff report, it looks like, based on provincial numbers, there's potentially to have more than 24 children. Is that limit of 24 children something that the proponent has requested, that we have proposed, or where did that 24 number come from?
Thanks for that question, and through the chair and mayor to everyone. The group care license under the provincial child care licensing regulation, the maximum for this type of child care facility is 25. That's the hard sort of cap around that use, or for that license type. The applicant made a proposal for a total of 24. And because of the child to educator ratios, often that's why you see that the multiples of 8 within the child care facilities. So that maximum was proposed by the operator, even though technically, based on their provincial license, they could have one more child based on the provincial regulations. And there's certainly enough space in terms of indoor and outdoor area, but the applicant has set it out as an upper limit for them of 24.
Thank you very much.
Other questions? Councillor Pettengill?
Thank you. Just a couple, well, several, but two related to our authority with business licensing, maybe versus covenant. And just looking at some of the feedback, so there's two items related to that. The one is, might we or could we even limit outdoor recess time? So understanding some of the complaints, there's a 7 a.m. drop-off, but might we say, okay, outdoor play time should be restricted from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. or something like that? Is that even an option available to us? The other piece, I think there's a kind of well, we've identified a critical shortage across the spectrum. We've also have identified.
Do you want your first question answered?
Sure.
Thank you for the question. Under the business licensing bylaw, municipalities, we can regulate things like hours of operation for businesses. In the staff report, we did look at this, particularly as it relates to noise impacts. And certainly in 2014, when the district considered bumping the allowance for residential childcare facilities from what was then 8 kids to 16 kids, this topic or this matter was raised. Back in 2014, the council of the day and the discussion was centered around the notion that limiting outdoor play times for childcare use is quite tricky. The province does require children to be able to play outside. There's, it's sort of mandated as part of that sort of early education. Obviously, practically speaking, there's lots of things at play there, weather, the conditions outside, sort of how the kids are feeling on any given day, and trying to impose restrictions around noise and recess times was an area that back in the day the district was not, or council of the day didn't have an appetite for pursuing. And I think because of the difficulty around regulating and enforcing this, staff are not necessarily recommending that we go that far within the business licensing to limit hours of outdoor play.
Okay, thank you. And then somewhat related in terms of authority, we want to prioritize, I think, or stated a priority on local employment and local jobs. The report does speak to giving preference to people that live closer. Are we able, or will we consider giving preference to people who are locally employed to help sort of push that local employment angle? Because I think the spaces would still be full.
Through the mayor, just around that question of local employment and preferred, we had not discussed with the applicant going so far as to save spaces for locally employed. The major rationale for a proposed for the proposed priority placement for kids and families within 500 meters was to promote active travel to the childcare. So really following along the lines of that school catchment idea, and to reduce traffic congestion, requirement to drive, as well as there's obvious benefits there from a sort of a travel and GHG perspective as well, but primarily from the congestion standpoint. So we hadn't gone so far as to discuss local priority placement for people that are locally employed.
Okay, thank you. And then just speaking on the active transit piece, I rode my bike down just to look at the site. So I was coming from the north, and I found myself crossing a lot of roads. And to get in, the crosswalk across Loggers Lane is on the south side, and then you have to cross back again to get where the site is. And when I was exiting, I kind of found it strange. I felt kind of like I should be on the wrong side of the road riding out to get to that crosswalk, to the bike trail. And so I guess where I'm going with this, would we, or does it make sense to have a bike path or walking path along the north side of Blue Jay Way, and then a crosswalk that aligns, an additional crosswalk that aligns with the north side? It might have to be up a bit further north because there's, I think, an intersection on the other side. But can you just speak to what other sort of improvements we might make or ask the proponent to participate in to help facilitate some of that active transit?
Thank you. Through all of council, the improvements that have been discussed to date have been around installation of new parking signs. There was not discussion around repainting, for example, or reorienting or adjusting, I guess, the location of the crosswalk on Loggers Lane. Definitely point taken just around the location of that crosswalk. I think that's probably a long-standing crosswalk location that's been repainted over time based on the entry and probably some sight lines and visibility into the Brennan Park and into the fields there. If council would like consideration for adjusting the location of that crosswalk in future, through our active transportation planning, and there's also some improvements that are planned for the other entry to Brennan Park as well. So that could be considered kind of in tandem with those improvements. We don't have a cost. I don't have a cost necessarily lined up for that crosswalk adjustment. to highlight for council today. If that's something that council would like staff to consider and discuss with the applicant, I'd be happy to discuss further.
If I can just say quickly on that, I don't necessarily know if it makes sense in a case like this for the proponent to bear this, or if we should share it or we should do it. But I think, maybe a crosswalk on either side and some attention to bike lanes around there might make sense if we want people to be walking and biking as much as possible. Mayor, do I have time for a couple others?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Just curious, you mentioned the application came in September, and understanding that we have a child care challenge right now. I'm wondering, is just to understand the obstacles a bit better, and is this because we were working on our broader planning, and I can't remember the actual plan name, but we just got a report. Is that what we were sort of waiting for before proceeding to this, or are there other things that are kind of making it hard for us to address some of the child care issues?
Just for clarity, for my benefit, are you speaking to sort of the time that's taken to review the specific application, or is it more barriers kind of across the board? Okay. Thank you for that clarification. So, yeah, the application was received back in September. With the load of applications that are coming in, this is something that doesn't technically meet the sort of expedited review, but because of the child care demand and issue that we're facing, we did try and review as quickly as possible. The application, I think, was posted in to the development showcase. It waited for the 21 days, and then scheduling the public information meeting didn't happen until January. The tricky part was the Christmas break there, and also the applicant, in terms of coordinating, one of them was out of country for a little while. So we did host the meeting in January, looked at the different feedback that we received, and have been working with the applicant to sort of set out the different measures to adequately address the impacts. And then, unfortunately, COVID hit. So this application would have been brought forward probably in March at some point, but then with the COVID, it was not able to be brought forward until now.
Okay, thank you. And then I see there's parkland between the proposed location and Brennan Park, and there's talk about some of the parking being at Brennan Park and so on. And I'm not clear on who has ownership of that property, but could we or would we consider a trail or a path through to really almost encourage people to park at Brennan Park and make that access from parking and walking over that way and those neighborhoods, connection to the neighborhoods to the north a bit easier?
Thank you for that question. That's an interesting idea, and that I will let council know that the area to the rear of the subject lot 4 and that wraps around is Loggers Lane Creek. That area is highly sensitive. It does have a riparian covenant. Typically, we don't promote kind of trails kind of actively through those riparian areas. Trails are something that would have to be kind of compensated for, and currently there are not many trails. It's quite a wetted area back there, and so a shortcut trail has not been considered because of the riparian sensitivity and what would be required, I think, for trail building in the back there.
Okay, and I have one final item, if I might. So in reading the feedback, most of the support seems to be, and there's a fair bit of support, but it seems to be quite particular to the operator as opposed to that particular location. There is a lot of talk about general need in that area, but I guess what I'm struggling with is, does it make more sense to do a TUP here than more broadly enable childcare throughout our neighborhoods as part of our zoning bylaw rewrite and then beyond that, once it's sort of generally allowed, manage some of the specifics with business licenses. And so I guess I'm wondering, it sort of seems that there's a good opportunity here, and we're trying to capture it with an ad hoc spot zoning, but I'm really wondering if that, if it just makes more sense to more generally allow this sort of thing to a specific density in neighborhoods, and then therefore if a TUP here would make more sense.
Thank you. There's a couple of different pieces there that I'll try and speak to and address. Firstly, consideration for a TUP, I think is an approach that if we were testing out a use, typically that, would be an opportunity to see how the use plays out. For this applicant, with the building changes that are required to adjust and shift the occupancy from that residential to that group, that A2 occupancy, which is essentially like, a small school for that assembly use. The financial, the funding of those changes is not insignificant to be able to make those changes. And so without the certainty of sort of a longer-term zoning, and use being conferred, I'm not sure if the applicant would be interested in pursuing it sort of on a shorter-term basis without the certainty of sort of longer-term. Consideration from, and I will say, I think going forward, based on the need in the community and what we know and the community plan directives to build out more complete neighborhoods that have a greater integration of uses. I think going forward, we will be looking to, from the get-go, establish child care facility use within existing neighborhoods. There's a lot of good rationale for doing that. That said, with this application, the project was initially designed for sort of single use only, but based on some of the land use principles around integrating use, these types of kind of amenity uses within neighborhoods, we have gone forward and recommended and highlighted support for this type of use integration. Site-specific zoning, in one way, could be seen as a barrier, I guess, for childcare operators. But I think where you're looking at an increased intensity of use, the benefit of a spot zoning also allows for very close review of the different types of attributes that that we want to consider about whether or not the use and the occupancy can support, doesn't aggravate the neighborhood, and that there's adequate parking and adequate outdoor area and access to trails and proximity of different uses. So on one hand, it seems like spot zoning might be a barrier, but it also provides an opportunity for us to look really closely at these types of uses and how well or how, whether they do or do not complement the neighborhood and whatnot.
Thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Buxton, did you want to say something?
Oh, yeah, sorry, just this is in response to Councillor Pettingill's question around this is going back a little bit, the pedestrian crossing on Loggers Lane.
Yeah.
There's a reason it's on the south side. On the north side, it wouldn't function. It's going to interfere with the access into the campground. That's the reason it's on the south side, and we wouldn't recommend putting one on the north side.
Thank you. Councillors, any other questions for Ms. McJanet at this point? Ms. McJanet, this change of use, it cannot go back to a residential use without a rezoning again, is that correct?
Thanks for that question. What we've done in the zoning bylaw, or in the amendment bylaw, is to add the child care facility as an additional principal use on Lot 4. But we're not taking away the residential use. So it could be used and converted back to a residential use. We didn't want to remove that ability.
Right, so with a change in ownership, it is conceivable that it would go back to a residential use.
It could, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Within the
And I'm sorry if I missed this, but in terms of car traffic circulation, cars coming from the north down Loggers Lane, you're expecting them to pull in still from the south, or?
That's for, for detailed discussion through the traffic management plan. That is one way to prevent or avoid tricky turnarounds.
Yeah, the U-turn
mid-block.
scenario. Okay. Is there a sidewalk along Blue Jay Way on the north side?
Yes, there is.
Yeah, okay. Also, just in the staff report, I was a little bit confused about the fence. Maybe I'm just reading it wrong. If you go to your, it said increased fence height from 2.44 to 1.22, which sounds like a decrease. 2.44 is associated with 6 feet, and 1.22 is associated with 8 feet. But it's just a typo, right? You're trying to make it higher to the 8-foot level.
That's correct. Mayor, through you to the council. So what that section of the amendment bylaw says is that fencing shall not exceed a height of 2.44 meters, which is the 8 feet. We do have a reduction in height that comes into play between the front lot line and the face of the building for that front setback area. So that's just saying that between the front lot line and the face of the building, the height is still being kept at a height of 1.22 meters, which is consistent with the bylaw currently. But in the rear, along the side setbacks, it allows for a bump of 2 feet from what is currently provided or allowed.
I don't know if this has been discussed with the applicant, but one of the things that the Montessori School in Skyridge does is that a staff person actually meets kids at the Drive to 5 location and walks with them. And given the challenges often of daycare drops, is that something that you've discussed with the applicant? And I know there's child ratios that they always have to have inside, so it's difficult to put a staff member outside. But I wondered if that was an option at Blue Jay Way or else at Brennan Park to actually staff the Drive to 5 for a particular amount of time and walk children over.
Thank you for the comment and question. Having an off-site essentially drop-off, that hasn't been discussed exactly, but we have discussed examples. In fact, Project Play educator Rosa Barcotti in some of the other preschools that she has operated, she's highlighted that in some of the larger preschools, there's a practice whereby parents do not get out of their vehicle. They basically drop, the child gets out of the vehicle into the waiting arms of their teacher and then go inside. And so that there's actually, parents aren't actually coming into the child care center, which makes drop-off much more efficient and reduces congestion. So the applicant has highlighted that practice as an example used in other settings.
Okay. Is there a reason you felt that this should only come for first reading? Staff
brought it forward for first reading just to give council an opportunity to provide input and see if the bylaw as drafted hit the mark. And so we wanted to bring that forward. And given the number of comments that were received on the application, we also just wanted to let council, let those comments kind of sit with council. If council is interested in the two readings at once, we can pursue that and set up a public hearing date at the next available opportunity.
Is there an opportunity, if we did pass first two readings, to also have the traffic management plan come back at public hearing? as part of the public hearing submission?
With the feedback that I've received from council, if there are specific aspects of the traffic management that you would like to highlight, receive more review and consideration, that is helpful, and then we can bring it back as part of the public hearing package for council and community to consider as part of that public hearing material.
Right, but we would keep the actual traffic management plan as part of adoption.
We would want to make sure to highlight any proposed changes, substantive or material changes to the traffic management plan as proposed, as we would want to bring that forward as part of the public hearing. Okay. Yeah.
Any other questions, council? Wondering, I'm just trying to be able to see everyone on my screen here. Oh, now I see you, Councillor Stoner. Did you have your hand up as well? Councillor Pettingill.
One I missed. Can you just, and thank you for the presentation, Mr. McJanet. Can you just speak to how setbacks here compare with other roughly equivalent size facilities here in Squamish or other communities?
Sure, you bet. Through the council, so in looking at the setbacks within the zoning currently for the CD, I'll start with the CD zoning for CD 38. Sorry, I've got so many CD zone numbers in my head right now. So the setbacks that are existing here are small hut setbacks that are kind of commensurate with the small lot zoning. So it's the interior side lot line setbacks are 1.82 meters, which are small. Interestingly, I had a look at some of the other setbacks that you might see or that we have, for example, in the Amble Path neighborhood, where we do have a group care facility that is also sort of a small lot residential zone. And the setbacks are actually even slightly smaller for that example. When you look at childcare uses co-located in churches, for example, in Garibaldi Estates, within the RS1A zone, there you have slightly larger setbacks, but not by much. You know, the interior lot line setbacks are around 2 meters. Usually you'll have a larger setback if you've got a corner lot. The corner lot side yard, so the setback is similar to the front lot line. I'm not super familiar and can't sort of provide a specific example of setbacks based on, a specific zone in another community. Typically with like a residential lot, with our RS1, you've got setbacks that are a little bit larger, like 2 to 3 meters. Hopefully that provides a little bit of context there. Usually the larger the lot, and for larger dwellings or buildings, you'll have a larger setback.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from folks who haven't spoken yet? All right, Ms. McJanet, could you take your presentation down so that I can see everyone at the same time? Thank you. Did I see your hand, Councillor Stoner?
Yeah, if there's no further questions, I was going to move first and second reading.
I'll second that. Go ahead if you'd like to comment.
Yeah. Thanks so much to staff, the applicant, and the community for all the work that's gone into this so far. This has obviously been a bit of a lightning rod of a proposal, and I think that it's really important to go through the process that we're going through in terms of allowing the feedback that we're receiving, and the proponent has really stepped up to the plate in terms of responding to some of the concerns and considerations that I think the community has raised around traffic management in particular, and noise. And I think that we're getting much further along in terms of a workable solution here. There's no doubt that we're in the middle of a childcare crisis, and we do need to support wherever we can more operators operating in neighborhoods. I think that's really important, that people are able to walk their kids to their daycare and their schools where possible. This is a growing neighborhood, as you mentioned in your presentation. It's only 75% built out, and there's townhome developments just north to it, and there's no doubt that there'll be an increased number of children in this area that will benefit from having childcare close by. So I'm happy to support first and second reading. My only consideration that I would like to see brought back during public hearing would be further details around the traffic management plan, and especially further thinking or detailed description of how we're going to stop folks from U-turning at the end of Blue Jay. That's the one piece to me that I don't think is entirely clear, and may require a little bit of further thought in terms of how we stop folks from doing a full U-turn in that area, because I see that as the biggest concern from my perspective. But with that, happy to support the first two readings. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Stoner. Councillor French.
Thank you. And Councillor Stoner expressed many of the things I was planning to say. I agree. I'd like to see a more detailed traffic plan at public hearing. I met the owners of this home many months ago, and based on my meeting with them and the positive letters supporting this change, I'm confident that turning this home into a daycare center is going to provide a net positive benefit for that neighborhood and the community as a whole. We have two similar centers that have operated successfully, one in Amblepath and also on Garibaldi Way, that are very similar to what we're seeing in this proposal. Despite predictions of traffic mayhem and other unfavorable outcomes if this goes ahead and reduce property values for the neighboring homes.
So remember, Councillor French, this is not the public hearing yet, so this is just to pass first and second reading.
Very good. I support first and second reading. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. I note in the public comments, there's a few people pointing to general neighborhood planning issues, quote, lack of planning and foresight. And I do appreciate this perspective. We have, however, learned lessons since 2008. And I think we're doing a better job. And we have reviewed facilities recently in other developments, for example, Centennial Way. Given our identified needs over the next decade, it's important we get it right. And I've really appreciated the thoroughness of the discussion here this afternoon, questions from my colleagues, and Ms. Anna's orientation. I'll just finish off by highlighting I do think that the U-turn issue is of significance. We have U-turns on Cleveland. We have U-turns on Highway 99. And I think that is some likelihood that we need to be planning for or some measures here, signage or what have you, an issue to monitor. Thank you. I'm in support of the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Pettengill, and then Councillor Herford.
Yes, thank you. So I will be supporting first and second reading. This is a bit of a change from the original zoning, but, as a community, we always need to be looking at our zoning and how we need to adjust our community to address changing needs, changing values, and so on. And I think this does a good job of that, helping to understand the setbacks in the context of other facilities, help me feel comfortable with this. I do think there is some values still, and I'm also very interested in the traffic plan. I understand there are intersection issues on the opposite side of Loggers Lane, but I think even a bit further north, even though it might not be at an intersection, I think there's opportunity for crosswalk or bike lanes or something there. And I'm not sure that the proponent, given our childcare crisis, is the one that should be bearing that burden, but I would like to see some examination of that in the traffic plan when it comes back, but I'm happy to support this for now. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Herford.
Thank you. Our recently received childcare action plan highlighted the need for spaces throughout our community, and I think it said 52 spaces needed by 2021, and I see this as a needed step forward. And integrating with the neighborhood, as everyone, I think everyone has stated, the need to examine this traffic plan and the possible sort of pinch points in that plan. But I'm sure we'll hear more about that as it comes to public hearing. But I'm happy to move this forward, and I'm happy to see us all taking action on an action plan. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Herford. For me, this certainly meets the bar to provide first 2 readings. I think neighborhoods do evolve. I think staff have done a great job trying to balance the need for childcare with the needs of the community. We can't ignore just how tight that traffic management plan, I think, will need to be. It's something we need to be really mindful of. But I certainly think it is time that we hear from the public on this at a public hearing. And so it should, I think, get first 2 readings at this time. Now, Ms. McJennet, we don't have a date selected. Would it be okay to say the first possible date? I'm looking at Ms. Arthurs now. Oh, do you want us to choose a date? Do you have a date, Ms. McJennet, in mind, or do you want to come back at a subsequent meeting?
Thank you. I do have a tentative date that we were looking at in discussion with Legislative Services of September 15th, but that was not fully confirmed, of course. But looking to Ms. Arthurs to let us know if that's okay to highlight at this time, if we wanted to assign a date right away.
I'm seeing hand waving. So I think we might have to come back to set a motion for, go ahead, Ms. Arthur.
Thank you.
So, Ms. Arthur, you'd like us to, that is going to be the UBCM convention. The virtual one is from the 22nd to the 24th. And I don't know if there's evening events, but I actually don't want to tie council's hands at this point. She offered up the 5th Tuesday. Ms. McJennet, do you want to come back to this?
Sure. I think because of the time that this application has been in process, certainly we're keen to see the first available date, but we can work with Legislative Services and bring it back for resolution later.
Yeah, I see that we lose the first Tuesday of the month. That is, are we meeting on the 1st? Are we losing, when's Labor Day? So we do have 5 Tuesdays. Can we do it on the 8th? What about the 8th, Ms. McJennet?
Yep, that's definitely available for staff.
That would be the 2nd Tuesday. Okay. So, Councillor Stoner, your motion, which I seconded, would be September 8th, 2020 as the public hearing date. That's fine? Okay. So with all comments heard, with the motion reading first 2 readings and a public hearing date set for September 8th, 2020, I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Ms. McJennet.
Thank you so much, Council.
Okay. Up next, item 3B for adoption is the District of Squamish Fees and Charges Bylaw. This is bylaw number 2764-2020 to make amendments around campground fees during the health emergency. Is there someone that would like to move adoption? It's moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Council, maybe a 5-minute recess here, and we'll come back at 1:45. We are back in our special business meeting, Tuesday, June 30th. We're on item 4.1. This is the Centennial Way Water Main Extension. I am turning it over to Ms. Naseby.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'll just share my screen here.
It's nice to see you, by the way. We haven't seen you in a while.
Thank you. You as well.
So we've got your presentation mode, so I don't know if you can change that. So yeah, duplicate. There we go. Better.
Does that work?
Yep.
Okay, great. Good afternoon. My name is Elaine Naseby. I'm a community planner with Community Planning. Today I'm bringing forward an item that's related to rezoning bylaw number 2529-2018, and that's the Centennial Way mixed-use neighborhood node in proximity to Brennan Park. Today's item is the Centennial Way water main extension. So today, staff is looking for council confirmation on 2 items: the allocation of the community amenity contribution, the CAC, and the timing of the Centennial and Loggers Lane intersection upgrade. So the objective of the CAC item is to gain council confirmation that a $353,000 value in the Centennial Ways rezoning bylaw should remain in the CAC's cash in lieu of critical amenities fund, or the alternate staff recommendation is for the funds to be directed from the CAC fund to the water main capital budget to facilitate construction of an extension to the district water main on Centennial Way. The objective of the second intersection item is to gain council endorsement for changing the timing of the construction of the intersection to align with overall development construction impacts, moving it from phase 1 to phase 3. So the rezoning parcels were previously the Whistlepunk Hollow RV Park, and so the rezoning amends the land use from campground to mixed-use comprehensive development. The application received 3rd reading February 18th, 2020. And as for timing, staff is bringing forward this item today as staff is working with the applicant on preparing the Land Development Agreement, or the LDA, which is a legal agreement and a condition for bylaw adoption. So it would be good to resolve these 2 items before the LDA is finalized, rather than amend the LDA later. So the Centennial Way rezoning is an opportunity for council to fund the extension of the district water main to parcels east on Centennial Way. It would provide municipal potable drinking water and firefighting capability to parcels east of the subject development, with potential to also service medium and heavy industrial users farther east. So for some context, the Mamquam River Access Society, that's a map there of their campground. So MRAS has created a low amenity, affordable campground east on Centennial Way, and the campground is on Crown land with a license of occupation. The land was rezoned for this use in 2016, and it's been operational since 2018. It addresses the district's critical need for camping facilities. Seasonal visitors, as well as those working in the community, stay at the campground, and there is no water supply. The Squamish Valley Rod and Gun Club is a long-standing community organization and facility with a diverse membership and amenities. So the Squamish Valley Rod and Gun Club has a well on site with washrooms and standpipes, but the water is not potable. And so Vancouver Coastal Health, or VCH, has expressed continued concern that both of those sites lack potable water and that they should be serviced with district potable water. And so as part of this item, Those three entities have all requested that a water main extension be funded through this rezoning's CAC. So in the CAC, that $350,000 value is included in the cash in lieu of critical amenities. The CAC policy directs that cash to capital facilities or other priorities if identified by master plan. The proposed waterline extension is not identified as a need or priority in our water master plan, and the district's critical facility funding needs still exist. The water master plan was completed in 2016. Accommodating the district's growth and the district's campground needs are considered emergent needs. The CAC policy indicates that community amenity contributions to third-party organizations are generally discouraged. The CAC policy does allow some flexibility in council directing CAC funds as it deems appropriate. An overview of the benefits and drawbacks to funding the water line are mostly that it provides potable water, and having water brought in on trucks has challenges such as requiring cleaning and testing, and it's expensive. It also having the potable water reduces the chance of patrons accessing water from the Mamquam River, which has health and environmental concerns. The water main and fire hydrant would provide firefighting capabilities, as there are fire hazards inherent with campfires in a campground, and wildfire hazard risks exist throughout the district. So the drawbacks of the water extension, VCH has noted that provision of potable water would result in increased grey water. There is no municipal sewage connection on site. However, the operator does have a plan to deal with the grey water. And also, with competing priorities in the district, those funds could go to other critical amenities. So today's staff seeks council direction. Extending this water main is not in the district's water master plan. It would not typically be a priority extension. And as mentioned, there are other identified priorities. MRAS has requested that a portion of the CACs provide potable water service to the campground and other properties that currently have no supply, which addresses a VCH concern. And then council is the decision maker with respect to CACs. For the intersection upgrade item, so this is the Centennial Way and Loggers Lane intersection. Council requested through the rezoning application that be done in phase 1 of the development. The proponent and the district engineering staff have further reviewed this and recommend that it be moved to phase 3 for the following reasons. That it may get damaged in subsequent construction to get to the phase 3 and the final build. And also, the district did realign and repave the intersection in 2019 with municipal funds. And so allowing a few years of use on that infrastructure would make the best use of those funds. In terms of implications, so for the budget, that $353,000 value was derived from a 2018 cost estimate. It's anticipated that those costs may have increased, maybe to a ballpark of $400,000. And so options include funding that full amount out of the CAC, to supplement the budget with an estimated $50,000 out of the district water main capital budget from whichever construction year it would occur. And also to mention, as there are industrial landowners further east on Centennial Way, it's recommended that there be some consultation with them to determine if they might be interested in contributing to this. If it was deemed to be brought down for the industrial use, then the best practice would have that oversize the main for their use. So they would need a larger size. And so a current cost estimate could be funded from the total CAC value. So the district has received comments requesting the extension of the water main east on Centennial Way, as I've already mentioned. And the council report included letters from MRAS, Squamish Valley Rod and Gun Club, and VCH. So should Council decide to extend the water main east on Centennial Way, the following steps would need to occur. As mentioned, engagement with industrial landowners, completion of a current engineering cost estimate for the work, and also the funds need to be included in the district's annual operating budget for the construction year. Because the water main extension in this location is not included as a priority in the 2016 Water Master Plan, and because the CAC policy discourages contributions to third-party organizations, the staff recommendation is to maintain the funds in the CAC cash in lieu of critical amenities. And the second part of the recommendation is to move the intersection upgrade from Phase 1 to Phase 3. However, the alternate staff recommendation is that Council can direct that the funds go to the water main extension in order to address the larger district-wide need for camping options, to provide water to a long-standing community facility, to extend water toward industrial uses on Centennial Way's designated truck route, and to address a VCH concern. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Naseby. Council, questions? Council French?
Yeah, I'd like to know, I think I know the answer to this, but can we split this motion so that the traffic circle is handled completely separate from the CAC and they're two distinctly different motions? That's my preference.
Yes, we can move it however Council wants. Any other questions?
That's it for now.
Okay, Councilor Pettengill, then Councilor Anderson.
So the question about the traffic circle, my understanding is that this is meant to be designed for truck use, industrial users. It's part of a truck route. So I'm a bit challenged to understand why it would be damaged, like what's going to happen in those 2 years of construction that wouldn't happen with normal industrial use. And I mean, to me, it sounds like there might be a flaw in the intersection design.
Through you, Mayor, yeah, that is a good point. The intersection hasn't actually been designed yet, so that's the next step as to whether it's a four-way or a roundabout. So we could look at that some more.
Okay, thank you. And the other thing, I guess I'm having trouble reconciling, we're talking about decommissioning or eventually phasing out the camping at Brenham Park. Yet we're talking about critical need for camping, possibly dedicating, I know the recommendation is not to dedicate this money, but I guess, and we also, by approving this development, got rid of some land that was zoned for camping, although it was being used for higher priced camping. I guess maybe the best question is, if we can have a reminder on when we will be getting a plan that talks about how we're going to resolve our camping needs.
We haven't directed that work, Councillor Pettengill.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Anderson and then Councillor Herford.
Thank you. Firstly, do we have a cost estimate, unless I missed it, for the larger size, the oversizing of the pipe for potential use by the industrial users further up the street? The figure of 400,000, a ballpark again, but do we have an estimate of the larger size?
Through you, Mayor, we have not done that work to date.
Secondly, I note in the review of the staff report, I don't see protective services there. I just wonder about the issue of looking after fire risk on Centennial Way. One of the potential uses of this area is small-scale sawmilling. For example, we have had pumice and rock crushing, different kinds of enterprises that can pose some risks regarding fire and needing to look after this in their site planning. So my second question is, have we or should we have
Fire Department Protective Services comment on that element of the plan or proposal?
Through you, Mayor, that is a great question. I know that at the time of the public hearing for the rezoning bylaw, the MRAS operator did reach out to our fire department for comment. And so I don't think that they've made a formal comment. It does increase firefighting capabilities, certainly, to extend the water service and include a fire hydrant there. But in terms of looking at, it also being able to fight the industrial uses, that is a level of detail we haven't gotten to.
Thank you. That may perhaps arise or be able to be considered further through your consultations. Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Herford and then Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. As far as the intersection goes, I distinctly remember this conversation, and I was a proponent of, I was in favor of moving it to earlier in the to phase one. But it seemed like the next week that intersection was redone because it was in such a bad way. And but similar to Councillor Pettingill, I'm curious what damage is going to be done here without having, considering that its intended use is for all those industrial users that will continually come through there. So I see Chris Wickham pop up there. Are we getting foreshadowing my answer, but I'll start there.
Mr. Wickham.
Thank you. I think as a general principle, we prefer to put the final lift and the final touches on intersections towards the end of a construction for a large construction project. It's a great point that there will be industrial traffic going through there anyway. With the realignment of that intersection, I think the push for the traffic circle or the redesign has become less urgent. With the new, as you pointed out, that intersection was in such horrible shape we just couldn't wait anymore, and we had to go in and do the work. And so now that it's in pretty good shape and it's handling the traffic well, the feeling is just that less damage will be done. And it's really a matter of no matter what the intersection design is, the more heavy trucks you put on. Cars almost don't matter. It's all about trucks. The more heavy trucks you put through an intersection or on a road, the more damage is done. And so if we wait a couple of years, then we'll get a couple more years of life out of that intersection before we have to go in again. During construction, it will have, as I said, it's the number of trucks. So during that intersection, it will have the regular day-to-day number of trucks coming from the industrial users, plus an extra number of trucks coming for all of the considerable construction activities for that large site. And so it'll simply reduce the lifespan of that intersection, and we'll need to go back. It'll become a municipal infrastructure at that point. We'll have to revamp it a few years earlier. So I think that was the thinking.
Go ahead, Councilor.
Thank you, and that all makes sense to me, and I agree the intersection is a vast improvement from what it was when this was initially discussed. But one of the things that I've noticed, I'm sure others in town have, is that during the construction phase, things seem to get a little bit worse before they get better. And I'm really concerned about the safety of navigating through that area while it's under construction as well. And if we're looking at improving this intersection from a safety standpoint of the our very busy active transportation network through that zone, I would like that to get better before it gets worse. And I'm concerned that doing the construction without having this done in the first phase is going to actually deteriorate the safety conditions at that intersection before it gets better. X number of years down the road when this when this development is closer to being done. So it's that time between that I do think is critical, because a lot of our plans in our other priority areas are pushing towards an increased usage of our active transportation network. And I don't want to see any degradation of it as we're trying to advance those goals. So taking on balance, I see by this motion where staff seems to be leaning, but can you speak specifically to that aspect of this?
Who wants to take that one?
I can take a first crack, and then I think Mr. Morwood is on as well. He may want to add to that.
I did see him. I thought he was just here to make sure you were answering correctly, but I will go to you, Mr. Morwood, if you'd like at some point. So go ahead, Mr. Wiggum.
I think it's a great point about intersection safety for active transportation is always important, but especially in that place where it's not only right next to Brennan Park, but has the corridor trail passing directly through. During the construction phase, we'll see large vehicles with professional drivers going through there. Once we are finished the construction phase and we get move-in of residents, we're going to see a very large spike in number of vehicles, number of trips, and obviously not professional drivers. And so I think I think it's not necessarily that the intersection safety improvements of the intersection upgrade will necessarily be needed right away. Is that something, would you like to add to that, Mr. Morwood?
No, I think that's, I missed some of the earlier preamble, but no, I think that's really accurate what you said.
Maybe to follow up on Councillor Herford's question is, in the site management plan, can we address the safety issue and truck movements on the corridor trail, even if we don't upgrade the intersection at this time? So I think what are our options if we don't do this upgrade right now? I think what Councillor Herford's getting at is how, through construction, we make sure that that stays safe and is a viable and a route that people are still choosing for their active transportation needs, rather than feeling like, oh, there's all that construction there and I don't feel safe now sending my kids down to Brennan Park on their own or sending them downtown via the corridor trail. Like, that's, I think, where Councillor Herford's getting at, is where do we strike that balance so that people still see this as a really good way to get downtown or to Brennan Park? Go ahead, Mr. Wiggum.
Yeah, absolutely. And the mechanism that we use for that is a work permit. So before any construction can take place on any of our sidewalks, roads, any municipal land, they need to have a traffic management plan in place. So if they're actually doing construction nearby the corridor trail itself, or on the corridor trail, or in the intersection, or on the road, then they'll have to have a traffic management plan that is approved by the engineering department. That would not take into account just increased traffic through that intersection, though. So that's the one thing that's a judgment call at this point. Is would there be enough increased traffic through that intersection during construction to cause, as you say, parents to feel like it's unsafe to send their kids down to Brennan Park anymore? We don't believe it will. But that, you're correct. That is the judgment call.
You good, Councillor Herford, or any follow-up?
Okay. Thank you for the replies, and I'll leave the intersection. We'll move on to the water. In the next steps of the water main issue, if we were to approve the extension of the water main down further to the east, as requested, there's still the matter of whether that will actually solve the issue of getting water to the campground. Given that there's an engineering challenge, I understand getting water main from wherever we extend it to the facility through a dike, which I believe was one of the topics that came up last time that we discussed this. And I see that it's the next step, but if that's, is that in reading it, I assume that this is a step that can be accomplished, because I'd hate to throw $330,000 or $400,000, whatever the total is at this point, towards solving that problem and not actually succeeding at doing so. So can you speak to the engineering challenges and the diking safety bit around running water mains through dikes?
Mayor, Council, through you. Yes, so early in this application, that was highlighted as a concern, and that best practice would have that water line on the land side of the dike. And so, yeah, how would it get through Centennial Way, which is the dike in that location? And so specifically, I did talk to our manager of municipal infrastructure, and he said that it's definitely not a showstopper. So if there's a will, it's possible. And so the campground operator has confirmed that if the water main can be extended to the driveway of the Rod and Gun Club, that he will work with our engineering department to connect to his site.
Follow up? Or are you good?
Sorry, could I follow up with that?
Yeah, go ahead and
yeah, I recently went through the Diking Authority for a fiber optic conduit that we installed, and it's quite a lengthy process. So it is a process, and it's I don't think we know today, or we even know in 6 months. So I think it's maybe before we get ahead of ourselves, you go and try to get the permit. And again, that could be a year from now before we actually get a final answer. So it can be quite a protracted time frame, and it was a challenge just for a fiber optic cable, which had no water in it. I think it's the same type of issues. The concern is that water kind of travels along the conduit. In the end, though, after about a year, we did get a permit for it. It was kind of, the issues were mitigatable. So, again, I don't think it's a showstopper, but it's quite a process, and we won't know for quite some time. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, last one.
Just on that point, where there's a way and there's patience there through a process, but all those things mean money, and I'm concerned about actually being able to solve this problem with this action. So, just as Mr. Morwood said, do we wait for a permitting standpoint to see if they can solve that, rather than put our $400,000 on the table and hope that they can come through with whatever's required on their end to solve this engineering challenge? And I am supportive of getting water there. I don't want my comments to be anything but that. But I want to make sure that we can get it over the line, and that they can, whatever the engineering solution is, which sometimes engineering solutions that can be quite expensive, I've noticed, that they can actually get over whatever that next hurdle is. So that's what I'm wrestling with currently on this one.
Thank you. Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. So can I just confirm, for the water line, it would go down Centennial Way until the Rod and Gun Club, and then it wouldn't cross the dike until it had to get to the campground. Is that correct? So it's not going down the dike.
That's correct. It would go parallel to the dike, and then it would be up to MRAS to cross the dike.
Thank you for that clarification. I'm also vaguely recalling that in the rezoning, there was a provision built in for water access that's somewhere on the Anthem property, that there was some form of tap or water access. Is that correct? My memory serving me right there.
Through you, Mayor, that is correct. There is an intention. There is a Mamcram River Dike Pavilion, so it's a public pavilion on the land side of the dike, sort of where that big gravel parking area currently is. But at this sort of early stage of rezoning, we haven't, fully determined that that's possible. But there's language that that's the intention, is so long as there's no reason we can't, that a water connection with a tap will be included there.
And then I do just want to clarify that the MRAS campground is on the water side of the dike, correct?
That's correct.
And it's on a Crown lease. And do we know how long that lease is for?
Unfortunately, I don't know that. Does any other staff know that?
If you don't, it's a random question out of the blue. All right. And then my only other question is, have we engaged, it's fine if we haven't, but have we done any early conversations with some of the industry folks further up the road in terms of just gauging interest in this, or is that really just the next step? If we move in this direction.
Through you, Mayor, that is the next step. We have engaged with industrial landowners in terms of the intersection design, just some early conversations, but we haven't in terms of the water.
And then one follow-up question, if we were to direct that the cash contribution goes into the CAC fund, we wanted to also encourage or direct staff to engage in some of those early conversations so I will clarify where I'm coming from. To me, I don't think that the proposal on the table is strong enough to warrant that full push. But if we do have industry further up the road that comes to the table and say, hey, we are actually really keen on doing this and it's important for firefighting, then that to me strengthens that case. So I'm curious if we can direct that cash to the CAC contribution fund, as well as pursue some of those further conversations and just kind of keep that money earmarked for the time being.
Through you, Mayor, yes, if Council decides to retain this money in the CAC fund, Council does have the discretion at a future time to then direct the money to this water line.
Thank you. Other questions? Councillor Pengill?
This one is maybe to Ms. Arthurs. Is there a reason why we couldn't or wouldn't in the resolution about the $353,000, just an addition that at this point is not attributed to any particular project?
It's just in the fund.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if just that extra clarification, and I'm just thinking as a member of the public, even myself, I wasn't entirely clear if this fund meant, and given all the context of the report, that we were still leaning towards one thing or the other. And I think, and I can speak to it later maybe, but there's value in being very explicit, because I think there is some expectation that we have agreed to do a water main as opposed to agreed to accept $353,000. And I think it would be helpful in resolution to be very clear, if we're not attributing that money to any specific thing at this point, to very, very explicitly state that. And I guess I'm not sure that for many people, just saying it's going to the fund makes that clear by itself.
Did you get that? Yeah. A couple of questions. You said they have a gray water plan. What is the gray water plan?
Through you, Mayor, I think that the term I've seen is a dry, I'm not sure entirely, but I think the idea is that it would be collected and then pumped out. So I believe that's true. I'd have to look back through some previous correspondence to recall what that gray water plan was.
Okay. Just going back to Councillor Stoner's question about water access at the pavilion on the dike as part of the Anthem development. There is a small parking area that's going to go there, isn't there?
That's correct.
So what I'm wondering is, in the design, is it possible to run a hose from someone's camper van to where the spigot will be?
Through you, Mayor, yes. The currently, staff's understanding is the patrons of the campground do fill up their water remotely and then bring it with them. So they access water at Brennan Park and some other locations. And so that was sort of where we landed in that rezoning application as an alternate water source, was that if the water wasn't going to be extended right to their site, that it was going to be you know, there was going to be a tap provided where they could fill up their water canisters and so forth.
And then finally, if we think about the order in which we would contemplate this, there's costing out the water main itself going down Centennial Way, but then there's also the money that MRSA has to raise to get something through the dike. Did we have a cost estimate on that?
Through you, Mayor, we do not, but they've just said that they would cover the cost.
So then there's the time to that, and then there's the need to engage with industrial users. So for me, it's sort of putting the cart before the horse in terms of understanding the need more broadly, and maybe perhaps committing those funds prematurely in advance of having the whole picture. So I feel like I don't have all the information I would need to be able to commit those funds today to that water main versus putting them in the community amenity provision fund. And then as part of our general water planning, starting to look at that in the course of things. Is that how, would staff pick this up as a potential future project to cost out and look at? Or if we just put in the provision fund today, staff would just stop their work on this for the time being. So I'm looking at that from 2 points. Who would, if we put in the provision, who's going to go and talk to the industrial users? Or do we need a motion, separate motion around that if this goes into the community amenity provision fund? And then what happens on the engineering fund side if we don't direct that work at this time? So maybe a question for Elaine and a question for Chris. Mr. Wickham.
As far as would it come up in the water master plan? It isn't in the water master plan at all at this time. If it came up at all, I mean, if maybe next time we update the water master plan in a few years, it might go in. We would be many, many years out. This isn't something that we're looking at doing. We have a lot of infrastructure that needs upgrading and replacement already in the plan.
And Ms. Naseby, the consultation piece.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it would be best if Council did make a motion directing staff to do the consultation and cost out the water, if that was Council's intention. Without Council direction to do that, staff wouldn't sort of, like Chris or Mr. Wickham said, that's not part of our marching orders.
All right. Are there any other questions for staff at this time? Councillor Herford.
I'd just like to go back to the intersection for a second. And if I remember correctly, when we had this discussion, the first go, we went from this was to be done in proposed to be done in phase 3. We moved it to phase 1. Did we adjust any other order of work? Like, are we moving? Was there something in phase 1 that we moved to phase 3? And it's staying in phase 3 now instead of having sort of these improvements done. I'm just curious what got shuffled and if it's being shuffled back as well.
Through you, Mayor, that's a good question. I can't recall any item that was shuffled as a result. I do have that phasing plan on my desktop, so I'll have a quick look, but I don't think there was anything that was shuffled as a result.
Good. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. So I think I heard some consensus around the intersection. I think I heard some consensus on not putting this money towards the water main at this time. But council may want to consider in a motion being put forward directing at least, perhaps directing some some work next year in the next budget cycle in the motion coming forward if this is going to go into the Community Amenity Provision Fund, or we just put it in the Community Amenity Fund and leave it at that. So, Councillor Anderson?
I would be prepared to put a motion forward to that effect. Shall I read a draft? I will move that staff be directed to undertake consultation with industrial property owners on Centennial Way East regarding improved water servicing, and further investigate service delivery options and costs. Earlier, you had another consideration. Did you want me to think we should add that as well? That is, would that be sufficient for that?
So you're moving both the consultation and the engineering work?
Yes.
Would one flow from the other in your motion? So if the industrial user said, we're good for now, we wouldn't do the engineering work, or would you want that to happen?
It's my feeling that that consultation will be important for defining options and costs for especially a larger capacity water main.
Staff, is that motion clear? Just before I get seconded, I just want to make sure that staff are clear on the direction in that motion.
Through you, Mayor, that did address the extension for the industrial users, but I'm wondering about the comment about the campground tying in. Is that meant to be part of this motion or a separate motion in terms of that being a determining factor as to whether we would extend the water line?
Councillor Anderson, this is your motion.
That was not part of my motion. I can offer an amendment. Perhaps Councillor Pettingill has a...
Are you offering a wording for this motion before it is seconded, Councillor Pettingill?
Well, trying to figure out a way if I should move this and then offer an amendment to include the camping piece. I would like to include that in the discussion somehow. I'd speak to that. Just not sure the best way to move forward.
Okay. Councillor Anderson, perhaps amend your motion if you'd
Yes.
like, or leave it and we can do it as a separate motion.
I don't have actually wording clear just offhand. It might be more efficient to, if someone else does have that wording clear, unless someone has a suggestion for me. I'll just leave my motion as is then, please.
Okay. Is there a seconder for Councillor Anderson's motion? Seconded by Councillor French. Comments? Councillor Pettingill.
Well, I would like to include in, and can deal with the wording second possibly, but a way to understand, you know, it sounded like from the staff report, the critical need for camping was a key driver for this. Industrial users may be an additional driver, but I would like to understand if $353,000 is the best way to solve our camping challenges in the context of our other options. And so, you know, maybe with the industrial users together with the MRAS, that does make the most sense, but I'm looking at both the industrial and the camping pieces to know this is the best investment, especially when we're considering transitioning lands at Brennan Park and other things too.
So are you supporting the motion or not supporting the motion?
I guess I would, with an addition of an examination of the camping aspect.
Are you making an amendment? And
Can I have a...
Then you need to provide the wording. And Councillor Anderson, can you email the wording to Melissa, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Can I have the wording repeated?
Certainly. That staff be directed to undertake consultation with industrial property owners on Centennial Way East regarding improving water services, and to further investigate service delivery options and costs. be a simple matter to include the campground consideration. That is the wording at present.
Okay, I think I will leave it. I'm not going to be able to come up with something intelligent on the spot here, so I would leave it to a secondary resolution, I think, to add in camping.
Thank you. Any other comments on this? Councillor Stoner?
Yeah, I appreciate the motion, but I will not be supporting it. I am in favor of the consultation piece, but I'm not in favor of directing staff time to do the full engineering component and costing, given that this is so low on our water priority list, water master plan. I'd be happy to support the first part, and if this fails, I will put that forward as a separate motion.
Councillor Herford.
Thank you. Similar to Councillor Stoner, I think the consultation work needs to be done, but I am hesitant that with any consultation work usually comes something along, yeah, but how much? So I'm curious about the level of detailed engineering work required to get to meaningful consultation that includes some form of price tag. I know we have a motion on the floor. We can't necessarily have too much talk there, but the two things I think are related, but I don't want to, and I'm not clear on the amount of work involved to get to sort of a rough number. So I'm hesitant to commit to the whole piece at this time without further discussion. But the consultation piece I'm in favor of.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson?
Yes, just to clarify, it's not my intention that to propose that the full engineering work be undertaken. Is simply an oversized pipe, a large capacity pipe, should be a simple matter to assess in a ballpark fashion for the purposes of meaningful consultation. If that's any clarification, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Herford.
Just wondering if any changes to the motion need to be made to reflect that, because as explained, that's great, but as stated in the motion, it doesn't really capture that to my mind.
Well, we have the motion on the floor that's been seconded. And a councillor on deck, two councillors on deck with other motions, I think. My comments is that I understand the intent actually of this motion, but I think it's confusing a couple of different things. Today we're making a decision about campground water access, and this motion goes much, much further than that. I too support consultation, but I would prefer that the outcomes of the consultation are then referred to the next update of the water master plan. And so that is the amendment I would like to put forward, is that we direct staff to engage with the industrial users along Centennial Way East, and that the outcome of that engagement is referred to the next update of the water master plan. If there's a seconder for that amendment. Councillor Pattengill, you're seconding that? So the reason I put this, yes, Jesse Moorwood. There's a motion on the table, so be careful. So this would be a matter of clarity. Correction or clarity, yeah. Don't debate with me.
Yeah. For a matter of clarity, the water master plan is our actionable item. So I just clarifying that if it goes into the water master plan, that's basically an actionable item, is generally how we treat that. So if that's what you're saying, that's fine. If that's not what you're saying, then you might want to adjust that.
The water users may say, nope, we don't need any water. They may say, yeah, we need water, but probably not for 10 years. In which case, wouldn't it go into the water master plan?
if that's our direction, yes, it would. If we're for sure going to do it in kind of generally in our water master plan, we have time frames, right? So we have short, medium, long kind of time frames, and if that's a long time frame and that's for sure something that we're going to do, then yes, it would go in the water master plan.
I'll withdraw my amendment then. I'm going to think about this some more. So the original motion's on the table. Can I call the question? All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Stoner, Mayor Elliott opposes. Motion carries. Okay, Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. I would also like to put forward a motion, hopefully for clarification, that staff engage with MRAS for them to conduct a quote, or for them to get a quote on cost of connecting the water main to the MRAS campground. And by them, I mean the proponent MRAS. So I do think that's an important piece of information to have in terms of, sorry, if it's seconded, I'll speak to it.
Seconded by Councillor Herford. Go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. So I do think that that's an important piece of information to have, both for us and for MRAS, in order to try and scope how feasible that connection is going to be in order to actually achieve that goal, if that's putting that CAC money towards the water main in the long term. And so I would like to see that quote be provided by MRAS and some confirmation from them that they'd be able to move forward with that.
Any other comments? Councillor Herford, then Councillor Pettengill.
Mike, yes, I'm supportive of this motion, and I would hope that the quote were to include also the permitting process, whatever studies involved, not just the mechanic, not just the sort of engineering solution of putting it through the dike, but that captures all that's involved in that as far as permitting, regulation, and time or consultation associated with that as well.
Councillor Pettengill?
I will support this motion, but I will have trouble ultimately supporting dedicating that money for this purpose without an understanding of how this fits into our broader approach to camping. And I think I'd rather deal with that as part of our budget and some of our other discussions rather than try and have another motion from the floor here. So for now, I'll just sort of make that comment that will be a missing piece for me.
Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. I'd like to move that Council reaffirm the allocation of $353,325 to the community amenity cash in lieu critical. The community amenity contributions cash in lieu of critical amenities to the community amenity provision fund. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Stoner. I just want to comment on this. I think that MRAS always pitched this as a low cost, low amenity campground, and they knew going into it that water was going to be a challenge as well as gray water, and they've worked really hard with BCH to come up with solutions. I think there is water in proximity to this campsite and more with the Anthem development going in. And so, you know, until such time as we have a real sense of the numbers and the need, then I'm happy to see these funds go into the critical amenities fund for the time being. Councillor Pettengill.
I was hoping to add an amendment just to the end and say without immediate dedication to any particular project.
That is implied in this fund.
Yeah, I think I'll speak to it if it's seconded.
Is there a seconder? There's no seconder, Councillor Pettengill.
Okay.
On the motion, any other comments? Councillor Stoner?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this in one of my questions, but I think to me, simply extending the water line for the campground and the Rod and Gun Club are not big enough poles unto themselves. So I am looking forward to initial consultation with some of the industrial users, and if there's other suggestions of use for water up that area, then I'm happy to further this conversation. But for the time being, there's not a strong enough case for me to dedicate that money directly to the water main extension, especially given a few things with the location of the campground and a few other unknowns. So happy to see this go into the general amenities fund or provision fund for now, and we can further that conversation when we have some further information.
Thanks, Councillor Stoner. Seeing no other hands, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. And then we have the intersection to deal with. There's a staff recommendation to move the upgrade to phase 3. Is that moved by Councillor French? Seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any comments? Councillor Pettengill.
Yeah, I'm probably not going to support this. I think I am challenged. I do think we want the active transit, the best active transit in there as soon as possible. I think a comment that jumped out to me is that we're expecting a lot of vehicular, like single vehicle traffic once this is completed. And my understanding of one of the rationales from this development was the proximity to Brennan Park and the walkability and all of those things. So I'm really hoping to see an intersection that will support the industrial users, that will support the active transit, and where we hopefully don't see a spike in single-use vehicles. And so I would like to see that intersection done up front.
Thank you. Councillor French?
Speaking in favor of this motion, one of the things that I'm conscious of is through the construction of the Anthem project, we will have very heavy trucks carrying lumber, drywall, heavy construction materials. And that is a use above and beyond the normal industrial traffic that is going to the eastern part of that property and beyond. So it just makes total economic sense to me to hold off and do that intersection improvement in phase 3.
Thank you. Councillor Herford.
Thank you. Similar to Councillor Pettengill, I see this as needing to do this early. I do accept that the modifications that were done rather recently to that intersection were an improvement, and I've seen it work, and it works better. But I would like to see this intersection improved so that it's an ongoing improvement of the active transportation network in that area. Then I know staff and Councillor French have mentioned the increased industrial traffic. The number of trucks coming out of Cardinal Concrete on a daily basis, and that's great, and that's good for, and they move through there. The percentage increase on that number for this construction project, I'd love to see that number. It is minimal compared to what happens there on a daily basis. This intersection needs to be designed to handle that traffic, and I think we should move on our improving our active transportation network at every possible opportunity, and there's one in front of us right now, and we should do that.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'll make mine. I'll be supporting the motion. I think that there wasn't complete agreement on the design of this intersection when we did the rezoning. I think this is an opportunity to watch the truck traffic move through here. Those truck drivers are some of the safest I've seen, and have used that intersection a lot, and my kids have too. I think what's critical for me is our traffic management plan. I still don't think for capital projects that proponents are putting up enough direction or indication for pedestrians and cyclists when their route is disrupted. And I look at the government road project that's going on right now, and there's no signage to tell bikers what to do when they get to the construction site. And I think we need, if we're going to ask proponents to think about how they're managing pedestrians and cyclists, then they need signage, not just for cars, but for pedestrians and cyclists. And I think the fact that this impacts the corridor trail, we're going to have to be really, really vigilant about, is it 100% clear to adults and children what they're supposed to do to get through to the next piece of the corridor trail as the construction's ongoing. And if we redo this intersection at phase 1, not only are we further disrupting the corridor trail at phase 1 while there's more trucks going through here, and I think it gets messier. So I'd rather see the decline in truck traffic from construction by waiting to phase 3 and just having a really stellar traffic management plan that includes cars, bikes, and pedestrians for that area through construction. So I will support this motion, but I think we can do better with our capital projects proponents on managing bike traffic and pedestrians. I'll call the question. All those in favor and those opposed? Councillor Pettengill and Councillor Herfer opposed. Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Okay. Next up is the UBCM 2020 Community Excellence Awards for the COVID-19 redeployment program. Is there anyone speaking to this? I know Ms. Goldbeck's not here today.
Yes, I can be very brief if Council can hear me.
Yes, we can. Thank you, Mr. Buxton.
I think it was 2 weeks ago Council passed a motion for the Wanayoke Park Bridge to Housing project to be submitted for this UBCM awards program, Community Excellence. So we're likewise just asking that we can also submit an application to the same program for the redeployment program that we've had. We need separate motions from Council each time we make an application to this program.
And
Thank you.
I believe at the time we were concerned that there wasn't the resources to put in the application, but that seems to have been overcome.
Correct. We're in the process of having that application wrapped up and submitted. The previous one's already gone in.
Great. Thank you. I'll move that if there's a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any comments? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up is a letter of support request from Mr. Gracie for the Squamish Trails Society. And this is for the Society's grant application for the Enabling Accessibility Fund.
I'll move that.
Moved by Councillor Stoner, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Herford. This is another great piece of work, so I wish them well in getting this grant. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. We have a motion here to cancel the regular business meetings for July 7th and the 21st, and that special business meetings be scheduled as required in July. We are working towards regularizing our schedule in September as we plan for more public participation, which of course we will start at the end of this month. But you can expect a return to evening meetings, Council. So be ready for it. We may even sneak one in July based on the agenda planner to be determined. But for now, we will move these to special business meetings, and hopefully that will be our last motion to do that. And we'll return to our regular schedule in September. Is there someone to move that? Councillor Herford? Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Stoner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. I did add a fifth item. So as part of the mayor's update, I did want to alert not only our community, but to council as well, that the province has started a 6-week engagement process to think about restarting. And as part of that, Minister Robinson is reaching out to mayors and holding conversations with them starting next Monday. And so I think it's important if council has any, this won't be our last opportunity and certainly doesn't prevent us from submitting a more formal document in terms of ideas for the restart to the minister. But I did want to check in and see if council had any specific thoughts or ideas that they felt in my initial conversation with the minister that I should put forward. And I will alert council that I have sent out questions to Tourism Squamish, the Chamber of Commerce, as well as our not-for-profit leaders. Because many of the values the NDP is trying to capture in the restart is about making sure that this recovery impacts everyone positively, not just a small portion of the population. So I did want to give council time at this point if they had any specific items they wanted me to consider for my Monday phone call. I get all of 2 minutes, I will tell you that much. But then there's a further discussion that's a little bit longer. But anyway, your thoughts, council. Councillor Pettengill.
So a few, I've had some people speak to me in terms of elective surgeries that have been canceled. Some people particularly struggling with ones related to pain management, and especially as some of the cannabis operations have been changed and impacted by COVID, they're finding it extra hard in terms of pain management. So I don't quite know what the solution is there, but it's something that I've heard some things about. I think looking a bit broader, but where I think our voice is important, really looking at how when we open, how that's impacting Indigenous populations in terms of the vulnerability when there are more remote communities, access to services, and some of the history around pandemics and settlers and so on. I think there are some gaps in our approach there that deserve some attention. And I would also then really like to reinforce the need, as we experience the pain of a pandemic, to move forward on climate action. We are having to undergo economic change anyways because of the pandemic, and so let's really make the change we need to make in a positive way. I read sort of mixed messages in the documents that were shared, where they do talk about the opportunity in moving towards a cleaner, greener economy, and they look to be doing that, but they're also making some reference, which is indirect to further LNG development, as if that's clean energy. And I think we should be reinforcing the fact that we need to be fossil-free, moving to fossil-free economies, and that's what we're looking for, investment, and willing to support that, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Pettengill. Others? Councillor Anderson and then Councillor Stoner.
An article has just appeared in today's Globe and Mail from or about the views of former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney on this very topic, and he goes to make some effort to emphasize our Aboriginal communities. And here in Squamish, we are tied to 7 or 8, depending on whether we include Indian River Valley, First Nations. And these are First Nations with interests and to build local economies that depend on infrastructure here in Squamish. It's a win-win. And we should be mindful of our ties to these communities, and the Squamish Nation is one of these that depends on development of infrastructure. And this is primarily transportation, but also in land use planning. So I actually just took notice of Mr. Mulroney's reference to Indigenous peoples in this country, and I nod to Councillor Pettengill on the same topic. This is certainly something that we can, from Squamish, emphasize. We're in the middle of this world, and we're in the crossroads of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. And by infrastructure, do you mean like even at the servicing level, water, sewer, or are you thinking even bigger? I haven't read that article in the Globe and Mail yet.
Yes. Without referring to the specifics of Mr. Mulroney's thoughts, I primarily am looking at transportation and commercial transportation, and but this also will include, for different development of properties for commercial and industrial uses, infrastructure, servicing infrastructure. I'm looking at that big picture, a regional picture, but it's one that in Squamish we should recognize as important and an opportunity for the province.
Thank you. Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. I've been thinking about this a little bit, and I think one of the things that keeps coming in my mind is more of a medium-term need and or opportunity. I think what we're starting to see is some of the reasons why we have been so successful at our current response to COVID-19 has been our ability, or the fortunate component has been that we've been going into spring and summer, and it has allowed us to spend a lot of time outdoors. We've really encouraged our communities to get outside and use public parks and park spaces. And I think one of the biggest concerns that I have going into the fall is that we have a tendency to go inside naturally when the weather gets bad. And as we're seeing kind of across the southern U.S., I think that's part of the reason why cases are skyrocketing, is because people are going inside to get air conditioning because it's really hot there right now. And that spreads the virus more quickly. And so I think that there's a really key opportunity in kind of the short to medium term to really support and reemphasize how we encourage people to use our outdoor public spaces through poor weather. So whether that is quick responses to interim covers for parks, other ways to encourage people to get outside and still come together in small groups in outdoor spaces through incremental weather, I think is going to be really critical for us through the fall and winter for phase 2 of this pandemic.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Herford.
Thank you. I think there's been some great points made already, and I'm supportive of all of them. And I just want to reinforce the position where I think there's some. I think this is the time to continue on with everything from an environmental standpoint, and keep moving forward on those policies and not back off those initiatives. Given the current circumstance, which I think has been tempting by some levels of government. So really, any opportunity to further that point, should be taken. Leave it there. It's quite a simple one, really.
Yep. Okay. Thanks. Councillor French.
Yeah, I don't have any pearls of wisdom greater than we've already heard, so I'll thank my colleagues for their fine contributions.
I think for myself, transit is going to be a big part of my comments, especially the need to support alternate funding models. We're seeing this both in the urban setting, the troubles that TransLink's had, but also across the province in sustainable funding for regional transit systems. And I think this is part of the recovery. The other piece too, I think, is for me the longer term is how we keep people connected to their jobs, even if the economy slows down. So especially our tourism-driven economy, I think as long as there aren't any big surprises, we'll likely have a really good summer. But what happens for some of these businesses and the advocacy I think the province needs to play in implementing some sort of principles, as they had in Australia, around negotiating between landlords and tenants. I think that the federal aspect on the rent subsidy is short term, and what our tenants need is a longer term view and a longer term willingness of landlords to negotiate in good faith on plans to keep tenants in spaces. And the other piece is advocating well to the federal government on the wage subsidy, which I think is going to need to continue for quite some time. And I don't know how you get over the hurdle of the layoffs, and we keep extending that time where people don't have to pay severance. But that may happen, and so I think there's a big question in my mind about what happens when we get to that point, when there is no more timeline. What happens if there is a second wave and we do have to go backwards a bit? I think that's really frightening for me, and why my message to the public continues to be, you can't let your guard down. The worst possible thing that could happen here is what is happening in many of the states, in that they're putting back in their lockdown restrictions, and I don't necessarily want to see us go in that direction because I think it would have a huge impact on our small business community. So those are some of the things that are certainly on my mind as I think about this. And there's lots more around housing, safe supply, that whole taking care of people and long-term care. It's going to be hard to fit everything into 2 minutes. I think I saw your hand, Councillor Stoner.
I'll use this opportunity to continue to plug that I think the provincial government should also be a strong supporter of a guaranteed minimum income as opposed to a wage subsidy and this mishmash of supports that we're seeing. Even the wage subsidy, I know medium to large scale businesses who have floundered to try and get all their ducks in a row in order to actually get that wage subsidy, and it's taken them 6 weeks, 8 weeks to get confirmation that they'd actually get it. So the amount of time and resources that are going in from both the business community as well as the counterpart federal government capacity is a little bit outrageous from my perspective. And so I think advocating for a more streamlined support across the nation will be critical for kind of this longer-term economic success of our country.
Great, thanks for that. I think BC said they might pilot that, didn't they? And then they haven't.
They're in the, so it would be another question. They do have inquiry currently going on about guaranteed minimum income, which was intended to come out, I think, a few months ago, but we haven't seen anything on it. So there is movement on it from an NDP perspective.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that reminder. Any other comments? Yes, Councillor Anderson?
We have adopted a community climate action plan, which has a very strong emphasis on retrofitting homes with respect to space heating. And economists and think tanks have been pointing out for years what a valuable tool that is for economic recovery or for stimulating local economies. We have a shortage of trades to undertake these retrofits. We need training programs beefed up. But we also have a lack of incentives. The incentives we'll need to drive that retrofit activity on the part of homeowners. So it's just flying the flag of our community climate action plan, but it's certainly something that we will be dependent on is enabling and facilitating all of those retrofits on home space heating.
Thank you. All right. We'll come back to this conversation, I'm sure, and we'll be looking at, as I said, comments that are coming in from our community partners as well to figure out what a proposal from Squamish might look like this fall. All right, thanks everyone. We are remarkably ahead of schedule. So it feels like the first time in a long time. A motion to close, and then we'll recess until 3:20. Motion to close moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor Stoner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.